back to the Mental Health Hour on Love Bay Afrobeat Music and Talk Radio. I'm your host, Felicia Fishoff, registered psychotherapist and founder of Rooted in Resilience Psychotherapy and Wellness. Tonight, we're continuing an important conversation that began on our last Wildcard Tuesday. In Behind the Behavior, a compassionate look at addiction beneath the surface, we challenge ourselves to look beyond the stereotypes and assumptions surrounding addiction. We explore the trauma, mental health challenges, and life experiences that often exist beneath behaviors many people struggle to understand. Our reminded us that addiction is rarely just about substances or behaviors. It is often about pain, survival, disconnection, and the human search for relief. But addiction doesn't happen in isolation. Its impacts reaches far beyond the individual. And tonight, we're shifting our focus to those whose stories are often left untold. Our episode is titled The People Who Love Them: Understanding Addiction, Family Impact, and the Path Forward. Last time we asked what's happening beneath the behavior. Tonight we're asking what's happening beneath the hearts of the people who love them. Because when one person struggles with addiction, entire families are affected. Partners may begin questioning themselves. Parents often carry guilt, wondering where they went wrong. Children can grow trying to make behaviors they were never meant to understand. Siblings may feel forgotten, and many families find themselves living with a complicated mix of love, fear, frustration, grief, hope, and uncertainty. Loving someone who is struggling with addiction can be one of life's most difficult balancing acts. How do you support someone without enabling them? How do you set healthy boundaries without feeling like you've abandoned them? How do you care for someone else's well being while protecting your own? These are the questions we'll be exploring tonight. I'm honored to be joined once again by an incredible panel of professionals, each bringing unique perspectives and years of experience supporting individuals, families, and communities affected by addiction. Joining us is Dr. Adrienne Sequeira, registered psychotherapist, registered marriage and family therapist, registered nurse, certified psychoanalyst, educator, and addiction specialist. Through decades of clinical practice, teaching, and family therapy, she has helped individuals and families better understand addiction, relationships, and the healing process. We're also joined by Josh Dale, registered psychotherapist and founder of Life Well Therapy. Come on. With over a decade of experience in mental health and addictions, Josh works with individuals navigating trauma, recovery, identity burnout, emotional regulation, and life's many transitions. His warm and collaborative approach reminds us that healing often begins when people feel genuinely seen and understood. Again is Andrew Roach, harm reduction counselor with Toronto Public Health. Andrew has spent years working on the front lines of addiction care, supporting individuals through harm reduction, overdose prevention, and opioid agonist therapy. He is deeply committed to reducing stigma and increasing access to compassionate care, particularly with Black and racialized communities. Together, we explore how addiction parents, children, siblings, and systems, the difference between supporting and enabling, the role of boundaries, trust and communication, and so much more. Before we begin, I'd like to remind our listeners that while tonight's discussion focuses on addiction, mental health, and family relationships, this program is intended for educational and community support purposes only. It is not a substitute for therapy, medical advice, diagnosis, or crisis intervention. If you or someone you love is struggling, we encourage you to reach out to a qualified healthcare professional or your local crisis services for support. If tonight's conversation resonates with you, we invite you to share this episode with someone who may need to hear it tonight. Addiction often thrives in silence, but healing begins with conversation. Always love we'd love to hear your reflections and questions throughout tonight's discussion. The conversation is right. This important topic together. Dr. Adrian, Josh, and Andrew, welcome back.
Good to be
Yes.
back.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. It's a lot more warm on this side of the globe. So, we're getting our vitamin D, the sun is shining. So, I'm so excited for tonight. I just know that it's going to be such an amazing conversation. And thank you for agreeing to come back. And yeah, last time was so powerful. I got a lot of good feedback from that episode. So thank you guys for being willing to come back and share a little bit more on this well needed discussion and topic.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Absolutely. So, you know how I love to start, right? When we think about the people who love them, when we think about our topic tonight, why do we need to be talking about this topic tonight?
Well, you referred to it as well. Like it doesn't just impact the one person who's using substances. It's a whole ecosystem of people who are around them, surrounding them, loving them,
Mm,
seeing what might be happening, and also they might be confused about how to deal with it, not necessarily sure how to navigate it. And there also is that level of like blame that they might have, or looking back on it and saying like, what could I have done better? Am I contributing to this? Am I a factor as to why they're using substances? Or to why they're drinking alcohol, like what is happening right now. So I think it's important for the people who love them to understand their role in it, to understand their what they can do and what they cannot do, like what they have the capability of doing, and some of the limitations that they might have as well. And I'm excited to get into some of the conversations around that. But I feel like it's so
Yeah.
important because there are a lot of people who are questioning what they can possibly do, and hopefully we're able to shed some light on that tonight.
Yeah.
absolutely.
I really hear the simplicity, Andrew, of like the confusion that families can have, and like how
Mhm.
do we simply navigate this? And what I've seen is that it can be that kind of surface level piece. Like that's their awareness, is we have someone in the family who is using substances, or is a person struggling with addiction, and we just need to get them to stop. But there's a whole kind of family dynamics, family systems, triggers, so many things that are happening below that surface that I think families would love help with. But they
Mhm,
often, are in that place. I've done some like consultations with families where
mhm,
they're about their daughter and the person's sister, of like, we just don't know what to do. Like we
Mhm.
don't know what to do.
mm,
And
mhm,
so getting below that surface of getting them resources and how to even maybe broaden their perspective of addiction, especially when the family system is involved. I think that brings them a sense of confidence, that sense of clarity. Oh, maybe here's what's going on. Oh, this is actually a wider perspective. Oh, I don't feel alone in this. Oh, okay.
mhm.
It's, I don't just have to fix the person. Maybe some other things need to be changed. And so I think just simplifying that, it's that sense of clarity, right? It's that sense of how do we help these families navigate, and as they step into that clarity, man, it can be powerful in terms of still
Yeah,
difficult, but powerful in terms of change.
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. Both of you have alluded to it and even explicated it a little bit, elaborated on it. But what I want to do as well is to kind of zoom in on the fact
Mm,
that on therapists and workers, the addiction workers, and so on, and kind of bring them into focus a little bit, because sometimes families feel that they are left out of the
Mm,
equation, and I'd like to kind of step back and say that as workers, we need to be more maybe aware of how families feel, and also take that
Mhm.
into account in maybe in goal setting by asking the person sitting in front of us, how do who do you have that's supporting you? How do they feel about this goal?
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
to just sort of broaden that whole piece a little bit, yeah, because they're also clients of the system. They're not the client sitting in front of you, but they're also I use the term pseudo clients, so
Mhm.
Mm.
in the system, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I see them dealing with so many things, not just kind of like, you know, the physical, like, um, um, impacts of their loved one with addiction, but again, mental and emotional, right? Like they're grieving as well. And I like that emphasis on them, like who's supporting them, who's caring for them, how do
Mhm.
we include them, right? Because they're having their wide array of emotions as well. This is a loved one going through this. There's many complexities with addiction. It's not just the use or the engagement in that behavior. There's so many different impacts. And I think, yeah, keep
Mhm.
bringing the family in, being a support to them as well. They're most definitely those pseudo clients. So I love that you mentioned that, because I just think of the grief and the even the trauma that they can go through, the
Mhm.
post traumatic stress that they can have when dealing with a family member with addiction. So yeah, I really like that, Dr. Adrian.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, great. Yeah.
Absolutely. Even just to piggyback off of our last episode that we did together, I know that we focused a lot on, like substances, but there are so many different types of addiction. And so, for family members that are tuning in tonight, what are some additional addictions that maybe we didn't cover last episode that we feel would be important to talk about today? And then we can talk a lot about, okay, so how do we support families and what are some of the things families may also experience?
I think in the context of families, I don't know about you too, but the one of the ones that comes up to mind is gambling, and
Hmm.
to see
Mm,
what that can do between spouses, and then for the wider family, the children involved in that as well, like
mhm,
money loss when you get into mortgages and secrecy, the secrecy that can also be involved in that, the
mhm,
breaking of trust, the betrayal, when you're dealing with finances, and not just kind of like oh, got this little savings account, but when it's like your big savings account, when it's, oh, we didn't know we took out another mortgage or whatever it might be. Yeah, a lot of grief, a lot of trauma, a lot of walls, a lot of resistance, a lot of
mhm,
dysfunction that can happen within that the whole family system now needs support. So I think gambling I've seen as a big one.
Yeah,
mhm,
yeah.
Yeah,
And
I've seen that as well. And also, like the sexual addiction, that can really dismantle a
mhm,
family relationship and everything. And again, a lot of these things operate in secrecy. So it's a lot of secret dealings, a lot of going behind the person's back, a lot of breaking trust for people. So it can be really devastating when things do come to light. And trying to piece those things together, and it can also leave the partner, wondering if I'm not enough, I'm not good enough for this person. It can really damage their self-esteem. So does take a lot to
mhm,
bring those pieces to come back together after like sexual addiction. It's something we didn't really
Mm,
highlight the last one either.
mhm,
and of course, there's this internet addiction. Internet. It's not in the DSM necessarily, but we're all recognizing
mhm,
social media, internet use, and so on is a growing issue, particularly with children and
yeah.
adolescents. Yeah.
yeah.
So I've definitely seen the addiction where, going to school, doing their homework, and it impacts obviously families because we see the very same things with withdrawal,
Right.
where
Mhm.
the teen may lash out. They want to play because, again, it is that addictive feeling, or, this is the same process that's happening. And so a lot of parents don't really know what to do in supporting, especially because, they can be playing in the middle of the night after going to bed. And I mean, I have kids, kids can sneak and do their thing, right? And all kids are universal. So I've definitely seen that
Mm.
as well. Yeah.
I think something I've seen families struggle with in this context when we talk about things like maybe other than this stereotypical, oh, it's drugs. It's like when we talk about video games and stuff, when you see people maybe I don't know if it's the proper terminology, but kind of high functioning, right? Like they're
Mm,
not kind of, it's not leading to being unhoused. It's not leading to severe weight loss and health complications. But when they're, able to, um, yeah, maintain it, even though it's impacting other areas of their life, like their schooling, as you said, right? Like their social life, like their hygiene, that kind of stuff. And then something you add into the mix is with these video games is you can actually make money off them. And so if you're in that, like parents sometimes are like, well, how do I, like, they're not hanging out with the bad crowd, they're not doing drugs, they're not drinking, they're making money off this. Like, I think it's an addiction, but how can I really say it's wrong and convince my child that it's wrong and that they shouldn't do it? And so again, there's that I need help navigating, like there is that sense of confusion, right? And so so many things. I just noticed it was with each situation, so many other elements can come into the mix that just does bring this sense of confusion and this sense of like, okay, like how do we support as a family?
Yeah.
mm, mhm. I think that one of the things that I loved from Dr. Adrian's course when I took it back in the day was that whole stages of change, right? How do family members begin to identify what stage their family member might be in, and like what are the things that they can do to start to maybe address some of the behaviors that they're seeing in their loved ones?
Right, right. Yeah, so that's a fabulous aid that you've brought up, Felicia. The stages of change were also taught in the mental health first aid course, actually. So,
Mhm.
that might be something that parents and family members might also want to access. It's a program of the Mental Health Commission of Canada, and it really is a fabulous resource. But the stages of change basically say that most of us, when we're changing, we go through stages. We don't just, decide to do something and do it instantly, all in one shot. We
Mhm.
might be, first of all, pre-contemplative. We might not even know we need to change, and then we move to contemplative, where it's on our radar, but we're not sure yet because we perhaps are not confident about our capacity and not competent. Perhaps we don't have the skills to make a go of it. And then we go from contemplative, once we've attained those skills, to maybe preparation, thinking about it, and then doing some research, and then the action phase where we actually make the changes. And then we might try a few different steps until we have something that's working for us, which we might see as the maintenance phase. So stages of change. Basically, it's helpful to recognize what stage the person is at and come alongside them. Because often what happens is we're in the action stage, but the person is still pre contemplative or they're contemplative. So, what we want to do is we want to get there, we want to come alongside them if they're pre contemplative and help them to move to the next stage. Um, yeah, and there is information online as well, which if you plug in these days with AI and so on, this is one of the blessings of AI. If you plug in stages of change, you'll get a lot of actionable material there.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think that's one of the biggest tools that we use with families as well. I think it's a great visual tool as well to kind of show families so they can it kind of clicks for them to be like, oh, maybe my loved one is in the pre-contemplative stage and I've been talking to them as if they are in the action, and that's why there's been a cross in terms of our communication in that sense. So I might be more prepared
Mm,
for them, and I'm telling them, hey, go to treatment, but they're not necessarily seeing the issue here. They don't think that there's any problem here because maybe they're not missing work. Maybe there is money in their bank account. Maybe they're kind of high functioning, like what Josh said. So there can but kind of be that miscommunication there. Um, one of the things that really helps family members is what we call motivational interviewing, where it's asking non-judgmental questions to your loved one, asking them just, hey, is this where you see your life going? Are you satisfied with some of the decisions that are being made? Are you happy right now? Like, what would you want to see in the future for your life? And these kind of questions can get your loved one thinking, and it can cause a little bit of a dissonance because if they're seeing that there's something that is happening in their life where they're using right now, but it's kind of preventing them to be their ideal self or something that they want to move forward to, or prevent them from going to a goal, then they can kind of see, well, maybe this is causing an issue. Maybe there is something here where I am using this too much, or I'm spending too much time with this substance or on this game or whatever the case may be. So I think motivational interviewing questions is a really good tool because it's a non-judgmental thing. It's more so just trying to get the person to question what's going on in their life and where they might see themselves. So
mhm.
that's a really good tool to help.
Yeah.
Yeah,
One
yeah.
of the one of the things that, as Dr. Adrian, you were talking about, and Andrew, you kind of touched on it. But one of the things I'm noticing is with families where I can see frustration come up is in that place where they might be in action, because it's been such a long time, right? And think of all the things that can happen with addiction when you talk about, there can be police involvement, hospital involvement, there can be finances spent, there can be the in and you're not allowed in the house, you are allowed in the house, you're not allowed in the house, you are in the house. There can be the people, the parents have exhausted kind of all their resources, and they've been in action for so long. But again, their loved one still might be in that pre-contemplative contemplative stage, and I see that's the frustration for some families. It's like why they're like, hey, we want to pull them into action right away is because they've been um, they've been impacted by this for so long, and that's where I feel there can be this disconnect of like, I don't even want to I don't care if they're in pre-contemplative, we need change now, like this has been too long. And I think that's where the frustration is. And so having people like you two to come alongside of these families and to show them how to do that and give them a sense of hope, right? Because honestly what they're kind of at their wits end. They're burnt out. I just listened to a podcast recently in terms of addiction in families, and there's this sense of helplessness that a lot of families have. And so how do you come alongside them and be like, "Hey, I hear you, right? You're at that action stage, and your loved one is maybe all the way back here at pre-contemplative. How can we come alongside of you to honor where you're at, to honor where they're at, and to help you and equip you to help them move forward?" Because I know that's where frustration comes in with families, is when they feel like, okay, they got to change now, and the person isn't ready.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm glad you touched on that, Josh, because one of the biggest things that like working with families that I've learned, and it might be the most frustrating thing, but also the most freeing thing is you can't change them. Like trying to reiterate to the family members that you don't have the power and the capability of changing your loved one. The most you can do is support them, walk alongside them, and kind of understand where your boundaries are, understanding what your limitations are, and then kind of making sure that you're setting that for them. But once you know you cannot change them, it's one freeing in the sense of, okay, it's not my full responsibility to do this. Like they have to do this on their own, and they have to want to do it. I can help to support them to do it. And also, if I understand that I can't change them, I don't have that burden anymore to make sure that I'm gonna just like drag somebody, because we've seen the statistics most times if we're trying to drag someone to treatment or give them an ultimatum or put something over their head where you're trying to do an intervention or something, it doesn't work out most of the time, because it's not an internal intrinsic motivation for your loved one. It's more so just a punishment. So they might course correct for a little bit, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it will be there for the long run. So it's more so just making sure that they're seeing what is wrong, and you can articulate that you're feeling frustrated, helpless, to your loved one, but also
Mhm.
just making sure that I can do what I can do and knowing your limitations. Because I think that sometimes family members and loved ones take on the burden of trying to save their loved ones. And that's a difficult thing to do because you can't necessarily save the person. They're going to have to want it. But it's a frustrating thing because you can't save them and you want to so badly. But it's also freeing in a sense of just like, hey, maybe that's a responsibility I'm putting on myself that is unrealistic.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. To access professional services, because sometimes when we're too close to the situation, and it's evoking all kinds of difficult and painful and intense emotions, which it would, of course, if you see a loved one, dabbling in something that's dangerous and harmful for them, then you want to see them change. But ideally, if you know that it's evoking all these difficult emotions, it might be best to get professional help involved for yourselves as well as for your loved one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You know, even bringing back the stages of change, I think one of the things that I appreciate is that it is circular, it's not linear, right? And I think that sometimes you think that, okay, someone starts their healing journey, or maybe they move through the stages, they get into action, they get into maintenance, and then they relapse, and then they go back. And for those listening tonight that may be journeying with someone with an addiction, just there sometimes you will feel disappointed, right? And I think that, not think, I know that the person also going through the addiction also feels disappointed, right? And
Mhm.
so I love what you said, Dr. Adrian, about families also need to get professional support. It's not just the loved one, because there's a lot of emotions underneath the surface that you also carry, that you also need to process.
Mhm.
Especially humans, we love control. We love to
Yeah.
be in control, right? It is just a human desire. And then when there are things that we experience that are out of our control, it is very hard to grapple with it,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? And so walking with someone, journeying with someone who understands that reality.
Yeah.
There are support groups out there, right? There's the Al-Anon, for example, where you can tune in globally. There's global groups. So even
Mhm.
if you're on a different side of the globe, there are groups that are happening around the clock, right?
Mhm.
Where you can tap in with other people who are experiencing very similar things, because you yourself need a support group as well.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yes, and unfortunately, if someone has started using when they're very young, before the brain has fully developed, then
Hmm.
unfortunately the picture is that they might have to go through treatment a few times before they can sustain a clean and sober and healthy lifestyle for themselves. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
Mhm.
I think that it's important to highlight that it's not necessarily drive, right? There is a very big biological aspect behind the addiction. So it's not that they may not want to get clean. They
Yes.
may very much want to get clean, but the biological process is just overriding that desire.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, so once a person has become addicted, especially to some substances, there's this physiological dependency
Mhm.
and the biology kicks in. That's right. The withdrawals, they can be very painful and uncomfortable, and that often pushes people to go back to relapse. And there are things, of course, you can do, and that's medically managed, medically supervised detox, which can help individuals to overcome that barrier
Mhm.
to progressing in their recovery. Yeah.
Absolutely. I know we mentioned it last episode, but I'll mention it again. Medical interventions, yes, are sometimes necessary. If someone has been drinking for 30 years and you cut them off cold turkey,
It's
they can
dangerous.
actually die,
Yeah.
right? So, not to scare you, Love Bay, but just to say that, they need to be weaned off under the observation of a medical professional. Cold turkey is not always the best intervention right away.
Mhm.
Depending, it depends. It depends. So,
And just like just talking about it from the client's perspective of someone who is dealing with the substance abuse or whatever the addiction may be, most of the times I'm talking to clients about it, they're aware that it's impacting their loved ones as well. But like we are talking about, there is that physiological piece. There is that piece where it's just like sometimes they don't even understand their own triggers or their own level of addiction and why they keep going back to it. So that there's that internal struggle that might be happening as well, but they're fully aware of who they've impacted, how negative it's been, and sometimes they feel that guilt, and that causes them to use even more. So I often encourage them to maybe try to facilitate a conversation or initiate a conversation of having those apologies or just saying, hey, I'm aware of what's going on here, and I'm trying, but I feel a little bit helpless. And also from the family's perspective, there's clients I've spoken to who have come from really tough situations, really traumatic situations, and have used. And there's other clients I've spoken to that will say that their upbringing was ideal, that there wasn't anything negative, and they're still using. So oftentimes for family members, they might try to find a pinpoint, a place of where they might blame themselves, or oh, I did this, and that's why this person's doing this, and that's not always the case. That's not something that you can put blame on for yourself or family members, because that just puts an unnecessary burden on you. Most of the times we're trying to do the best that we can, um, and it's hard. So even if you have the ideal situation and ideal environments, it sometimes can still happen. So you just want to make sure that you're taking that burden off of yourself too.
I know that it was mentioned earlier about boundaries and families setting healthy boundaries. Can we talk a little bit about what that could look like for families? Because I know it obviously depends on the situation, but sometimes it can have an impact on the family members where they need to set boundaries with that loved one that has an addiction, even though, guilt may come up for setting those set boundaries.
Yeah. One of the ones that I was just thinking about today, that I've actually seen happen is, when you talk about kind of things like, people will often talk about enabling versus boundaries, or what's enabling, versus support. What does that look like? And one of the ones that I thought was, sometimes you see with enabling, it's kind of, making that continued use easier, or you're partaking in that, right? That's that sense of enabling. So I think of like just giving money, knowing where that money's going, right? So particularly, I think of that with drug addiction is, just can I have $20? Yeah. Okay. And it's always this kind of giving the money, and one of the things in terms of like a boundary setting is, I've seen it happen where parents will give money for, or buy groceries, things like that, like, essential things like groceries, hygiene products. Instead of giving that person the money, they will actually support them in the essentials. And so I've seen that as a boundary setting of like, hey, I'm not going to, enable, or contribute to your continued use, but I do still want to support in ways that I can. And so I know that you'll need nutrition and hygiene, and so let me support in that way. And so that is, in a sense, support and setting boundaries. But that's kind of what I was thinking about even earlier today, of what I've actually seen is, and slowly implementing those sense of boundaries, moving away from maybe that, enabling, those enabling behaviors. And I know that that phrase can get tossed around. So I'm trying to be gentle with it, but it can get tossed around too much. But more going into that sense of support with those, healthy boundaries.
Yeah, yeah. So that's, this is one reason why it's helpful to have professionals involved with the family as well, because sometimes that emotional support while they're trying to figure out, it can be helpful, because it's hard. It's very hard when you love someone to be able to kind of be hard and come down hard on them or seem to. Yeah, and there are a number of different examples, even paying their rent directly so they don't get evicted and so on, can be helpful. The another sort of related piece that I would kind of slide in here as well, when it comes to families, sometimes families have been through this for years and years and years with their loved ones, and there have been multiple relapses. And each time, of course, a person who's coming back into recovery is very motivated, and they want their family to go all in and trust them. And sometimes that trust is not there, and they feel discouraged. It discourages them. But at the same time, when we're working with them, we can help them um, to be patient, and to keep working at it, and earning back, proving, showing their heart, their willingness, and so on to family members. But yeah, it is helpful to have professionals helping them through this process, because when
Mhm.
people are trying to navigate it by themselves, it can be very difficult and hard to interpret some of this. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with Dr. Adrian. It's because there's so many specific examples that it's tough with boundaries, because one boundary might work for one particular person, but it won't necessarily
Mhm.
work for another. So even if you're talking to another family member or another family that is dealing with someone that's dealing with substance abuse, that might have worked for that particular person because they all have their individual issues and needs, but it might not necessarily work for your family, or just how it would kind of play out. So I do want to say, like, if you are setting a boundary, that it does have to be something that is firm, which is difficult for the loved one to do, because you're seeing that loved one in pain, you're seeing that person crying out for something, and you know that you can help them with it, and maybe just kind of ease the situation. But if you articulated that boundary with them, it is something that you do have to be firm with, because anytime that boundaries continue to move, that is kind of what we would say is enabling in that sense, because we've established something and now you're going back on it, meaning that, to your loved one who is dealing with the substance issue at that particular moment, their main thing is just getting their hands on the substance or doing what they want to do. So you're not helping in that regard, even though it feels like you are, but you kind of just
Mhm.
avoiding a conflict. And I know sometimes we want to avoid conflicts, but sometimes those
Mhm.
conflicts are necessary to happen to establish those boundaries and that to make them firm.
Yeah.
But I do think that it is important to have a professional alongside you to kind of help to see if those things
Mhm.
would be beneficial or not.
Yeah. So here's a question for us then, and kind of through both of
Mhm.
what both of you were saying is something I've seen is Dr. Adrian, as you talked about, as again, and Felicia, you talked about it as kind of circular thing. It's not linear, but as relapse happens again and again, that's when I see more firm boundaries happen. Is the prolonged kind of cycle, going through the cycle of addiction, and the family's been through it, and that's when I see the firmness of like,
Mhm.
no, you can't come here at all, or like even if the person has no place to stay, it's like, no, we've been through this, you cannot stay here, and that's where I see the firmness come. But for those families that are just starting, maybe they're noticing they haven't been through it for 10, 15 years. Maybe they're just noticing it now. Maybe they don't want to wait until 15 years in to be like, okay, now I'm going to, you know, I have no choice but to set firm boundaries. How would we help them soften that sense of, or even empower them or strengthen them, or come alongside them as they're setting those boundaries
Mm.
initially, of like, okay, like I want to maybe be proactive with this, or I want to set some boundaries now. What would we do to, because as you said, it can suck, right? It can, those are your loved ones, trying to be firm, especially when that person is struggling, especially if they've been through significant trauma or experiences, right? And maybe have some compassion and empathy for them. And so setting that boundary is hard. But how do we, as I said, soften that or support them in that?
I would say that it goes hand in glove. It's not just about putting the boundaries in place. There has to be another aspect to it, and that aspect is we're steering the individual towards the next healthy choice, right?
Mm,
So that's what it's about. It's not just about protecting oneself from another disappointment, but it's to motivate them. It's a motivating factor to help them to see the all of the consequences that they were perhaps not experiencing because that boundary wasn't in place. Um, that piece needs to happen concurrently at the same
mm.
time. And
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah. Andrew, any thoughts
Yeah.
from you in terms of supporting through those boundary settings?
Yeah, anytime I've walked alongside a family member trying to create boundaries, it's understanding what their limitations are as well, understanding how far they're willing to go with the boundary, and just kind of getting a sense of where they might be at. So,
Mhm.
like you said, if is it 5 years in, is it 10 years in, is it something that they want to have a harsh, firm boundary on this, or is it something where okay, I'm going to start to establish these things because the person may not be used to boundaries. Usually, when we're seeing them, that's boundaries already been obliterated. So now we're trying to go back and try to start something. So for
Mhm.
the loved one, there's gonna be a natural pushback. So it's letting the family member know that initially when you articulate this boundary, there is going to be a pushback. They are going to test you
Mm,
on it, and you have to be prepared for that test.
mm,
And you have to when they come back. When they do inevitably push back on the boundary, I'm talking to the loved one and I'm asking, okay, how did you react? How did you feel? What was
mhm,
going on in your mind when that was happening? Did you stay firm, or did you kind of let the boundary kind of go loose a little bit?
mhm,
So it's that feedback as well that's really beneficial for the family member to know that the next time they set something, they can be a little bit more firm.
mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah. This is where all that lovely Felicia and Dr. Adrian, this is where all that lovely disruption of the homeostasis and the feedback loops come in,
Yeah.
and when you're dealing with the family system. But in terms of this is I really like what Dr. Adrian said, and you, Andrew, and I like the two sides of it, of the sense of protection but also the sense of motivation, right? Seeing it as a holistic thing, because one of the things I think that is beneficial for families is to know, like, is to relieve some of that guilt, some of that blame, some of that guilt of like, oh, if I do this, like I'm saying no and I'm hurting them, or I'm trying to set a boundary is, but even kind of walking through their emotions and the way that they've impacted, and that boundaries are in a sense of helping them as well. But then seeing that other side as motivating their loved ones. So it's not that they're um, trying to be malicious towards their loved one. It's that, hey, I'm recognizing what this is. I'm recognizing the consequences and the behaviors and the impact this is having, and I want to help them through the boundary work towards healthier behaviors, healthier choices. So I love that hand in glove thing of protection and support for ourselves, right? To lessen maybe the stress or the impacts on me and the rest of the family, but also to motivate the person dealing with addiction. Yeah, I
Mhm.
love
I
that.
think I think I would add to that as well, because I think that it's very dynamic in the sense that there's multiple people that can be impacted by the addiction. So I'm thinking even like
Mhm,
the children, like someone's children, if your spouse, your partner is you know battling an addiction, how do you protect your children? So then I start to think about the different dynamics of what it means to feel safe. How do you keep the family safe? How do you keep yourself emotionally safe, physically safe, psychologically safe? And are these boundaries protecting that? I think that would probably be one of the first questions that I would ask clients that I come alongside, because boundaries protect us from infection. Boundaries are, I like to tell my clients, boundaries are everywhere, right? We have
seatbelts.
everything. Everything's a boundary, right? And it is about, a sense of protection, self-preservation, because we've seen it also that, again, journeying with someone can feel draining, where you don't even recognize yourself because you're so immersed in it. So I would first ask, okay, so what is it that you are trying to protect when you are setting these boundaries? Like, what needs to be protected? What is a negotiable? What's a non-negotiable? I think that
Mhm.
that's where I would start. Obviously, when it comes to children, there are non-negotiables
Mhm.
when it comes to that and protecting their well-being.
Mhm.
But it could come off as being malicious or whatever. But I mean, children need to be protected sometimes.
Mhm.
And so I think those would be the kind of pinpointed factors that I would start with. And then maybe what are the softer boundaries that could be a little bit more diffuse that, okay, maybe we could use those things as a motivator, right? So we have this huge mountain that we want to climb. What are the baby steps? What are the motivators? What boundaries can we set around this? That if they maybe cross that boundary, you understand that it is a part of that addictive process, but you're still okay and you're still safe. So,
Yeah.
Mhm.
One of the things you mentioned there, and I could be going on onto another topic. You mentioned kind of the it can be draining. And a podcast I listened to, as I said the other day, he mentioned forget his name. Maybe it's Michael Barnes or something like that. He's got a PhD and he works with addiction. But he was talking about the through his study, there's the kind of this 80-20 phenomenon of
Mhm.
80% of the family's attention going to the person struggling with addiction and the impacts that's going on there, right? Like 80-20 of their capacity of their
Mhm.
attention, right? And let's say that's different if that person is an only child, but if there is a whole family, and if there's other siblings that need attention and love, and like the family is spread thin. This is where he talks
Mhm.
about children come in like parentified and having to grow up too soon and take care of themselves, as maybe the parents are preoccupied, and not to mention all the other factors. But I think of that burnout piece of families, of really needing to support them, of what does this look like to protect yourself, right? What does it look like to support, find support for yourself? What does it look like for the point where you're not now burnt out to the point of incapacitation, where now now you can't even be there for other people in your family.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a big piece too, is being mindful of the families that are dealing with that sense of, we're just burnt out, we have no capacity left. It's been 80-20 for too long, it's been 90-10, it's been all of our focus on
Mhm.
this.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point because I've seen family members go through that, and encourage them to have some self care days or self care moments, because so much they can get so ingrained in their loved one's addiction and what might be happening there, that they completely forget anything that might
Mhm.
be going on in their lives. They forget their friends, they forget their social supports, because they're just 100% locked into this, and it can be
Mhm.
very difficult and draining. And then that's when you see people get really frustrated, and then that's when they're like big blowouts happen. So
Mhm.
oftentimes I'm telling clients to, family members to, okay, have a night of just yourself. Go somewhere, do something that you enjoy. If it's a child and you have a couple, like, go on a date night. Don't talk about what's going on at home, but something different. Just trying to just make sure that you have that self-care moment
Mhm.
where you can take a break from this. This is not your full-time job, and then you can come back to it with a little bit of freshness. But I know when it gets so ingrained in your everyday life, it just gets draining to the point where it becomes such a big burden on you. It becomes hard to
Mhm.
deal with. But yeah, the self care, if possible, and that's another reason why what Dr. Adrian said was so important, is having that professional around you that can kind of see that and pinpoint that,
Mhm.
when you might be kind of like so. That's a blind spot for you. You might not be able to see that. Oh
Mhm.
yeah, I have been spending so much time on this issue, and I
Mhm.
haven't necessarily spent time for myself.
Yeah.
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 Mm.
Yeah, so both of you have alluded to this, but this whole business of what are your limitations, in terms of what boundaries are we, this family, going to set, or this
Mhm.
couple, etc. And that has to do with your individual limitations at this moment in time
Mhm.
because of burnout. So, what's the least common denominator is what you want to figure out. It doesn't mean it's going to be forever, but at this moment, you need to take back what you have, what's being depleted, and we may need to put a hard boundary, and that might determine what that boundary looks like. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You are listening to the Mental Health Hour on Love Bay Afrobeat Music and Talk Radio. Tonight, we're exploring how addiction impacts not only the individual, but also the families, partners, children, and communities who walk alongside them. One of the themes we've been discussing tonight is that healing rarely happens in isolation. It happens through connection, support, education, and communities that are willing to show up for one another. And speaking of investing in people and creating opportunities for the next generation, I'd like to take a moment to share something that is very close to the heart of the Love Bay family. As a not for profit organization, Love Bay Radio is committed to giving back to the communities we serve. Throughout the year, they create spaces for education, mentorship, connection, and empowerment. One of the ways they do so is through their annual scholarship program, supporting students as they pursue their educational and career goals. We're excited to share that the fourth annual Voices of the Millennials Youth Summit will take place on Saturday, July 11th, 2026 at Humber Valley United Church in Etobicoke. This inspiring event brings together youth, students, professionals, entrepreneurs, educators, and community leaders for a day of networking, mentorship, meaningful conversations, and opportunities for growth. Attendees will have the chance to hear from dynamic speakers, build valuable career paths, and engage in conversations that help shape their future. As part of this year's summit, Love Bay Radio will once again be awarding $1,000 scholarships to Canadian post secondary students. Scholarship priority areas include medical sciences, law, justice, and community leadership, skilled trades, and industry development, hospitality, tourism and service excellence, media, communications, and public relations, STEM, business, and finance. In addition to the scholarship, recipients may also be considered for internship opportunities through Love and get applications close today. June 30th. So do not let today close out if you have not applied, or if you know someone you know who, please share this with them. Okay. More information, email events 2026. That's LUVBAY events 2026 at gmail.com, or call 437-778-3299. Because when we invest in our young people, we invest in stronger families, stronger communities, and a brighter future for us all. And now let's return to tonight's conversation. Amazing. Now, Joshie, I think you did want to say something before the mid-show. All
I
right,
forget now.
jump.
That's all right. That, yeah, I forget it. I forget. Oh, I mean, I did. I probably had two thoughts. One that I forget, and one that I was going to bring up. So
All
again, probably
right.
shifting topics, but one of the things that comes to mind is like we've talked about, the impact of a loved one, and the context that we've been using is kind of in the child of, and so parents are dealing with this and maybe other siblings. But what about when it is the child witnessing the parents addiction? And this comes to mind. I did a program when I was on internship years ago. I did a program with CAS, and it was called Hugs, and I believe it was Help Us Grow Stronger, and it was supporting children whose parents have been involved in their lives have been impacted through addiction and substance use. And so I often think about like, the children who have grown up. The young children now, or the children who are now, adults that their parents have struggled with whatever, whether it was alcohol or drugs or gambling or, as Andrew talked about, the sexual addiction. What does that look like in terms of, um, yeah, supporting children, or what are the supports for children? How would we come alongside children whose parents have been through this? 'Cause we've been talking, the parents kind of supporting the children, but now it's like, okay, well, what if it's the child who's experienced this? Any thoughts?
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, in those situations, I've seen that it's a interesting dynamic because it's almost flipped on its head, where like the child becomes more of the parent and the more the caregiver in that
Mhm.
situation. Um, and then the person who's using the parent is more so just trying to figure out, like, hey, what should I do? What should I not do? So for kids, in that sense, it's again setting firm boundaries in terms of what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, when you have to leave that space, when you might have to find something for yourself, or to try to, if it's possible, if not, trying to reach out to supports, because that can be very difficult to see your parent deteriorating before your eyes, and that's supposed to be the person that's taking care of you. So it causes the child to grow up a lot faster than they possibly need to. And I would want to have them have professional help as well, because we know when they're growing up and they're seeing addiction, that just makes them even more susceptible to that as well.
Mhm.
So just making sure they
Yeah.
have safeguards in that, when they are seeing that, and if that's something that they're worried about, or before it even gets to that point, just having someone walk alongside them too.
Yeah, that's good. Dr. Adrian's in her. I feel like she was going to speak next, but she's in her golden era.
Yeah, I see
Well,
it.
golden hour.
The sun
She's
is
the
shadowing
golden
on.
hour. I sorry for interrupting, but I just felt the
My
sun come
hero.
in and like, oh, it's so nice. But I like what you were saying there, Andrew, and Dr. Adrian. If you want to speak before I do, 'cause since I asked the question, but do you have any thoughts as well?
Um, Yes, you've both triggered some thoughts for me, and I'll try and keep this brief. But whenever the child actually comes into treatment, whatever age they come into treatment and come onto the radar, that's we have to have age appropriate services for them. So it's one of the things that strikes me is that a child who's been traumatized, for instance, in the context of maybe a very chaotic home, where there was substance use or some other addiction going on, um, children are very different. Than they're not miniature adults, and they don't have the same sort of life experience. So even though they have grown up ahead of their years, they're still children. And they need, perhaps play therapy, someone who has specialized in working with children, who can go at their pace. Because when we have defenses up, they're there for a reason. And children may not deal with their trauma all in one shot. It may be layered, it may be over years as they grow and develop and mature and so on. So we need, they need to be connected to therapists who have that understanding and training, because otherwise they may be re-traumatized. We may re-traumatize them. So, yeah, it's going in step with them, and yeah, and just helping them to have the right approach at the right time. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that age appropriateness. That definitely makes sense, right? Um, yeah, that's something that yeah, it makes sense because if you try to speak to that child like you would maybe an adult client, again, they don't necessarily have the words to articulate, right? And the emotional awareness of what's going on, maybe it does come out in behavior or what psychosomatic symptoms, and
Mhm.
I like that idea of like play therapy, art therapy. for them to be able to express and to have someone come alongside of them. And speaking of someone come alongside of them, I often think of things like mentorship, or like I love the big brother big sister program of having, maybe a healthy attachment figure in your life, if unfortunately that is not your parents, and to have that person come alongside of you in terms of as your brain is developing, as you're making help you make sense of things, again age appropriately. But I think of the importance of stable relationships in a child's life, especially when there is a trauma, addiction, as you said, even chaos within the home. So, yeah, coming alongside this child in age appropriate ways that support their emotional expression, understanding, development. I think that's super important.
Yeah, yeah. If I can, as we're probably coming to the latter part of the show, I just wanted to also mention, children who may have internet use issues and social media issues and so on, and their parents who are probably feeling very challenged in how to deal with them. Just a couple of thoughts come to mind here as well about uh, how important it is for parents to role model um, uh, to their kids healthy social media use behavior and phone use behavior and so on. So the role of parents is very, very important, and maybe very doable, but perhaps we need to bring that into focus as well.
Mm. Do you think there's almost going so far the other way? We talked about kind of diffuse boundaries, but what about those sense of kind of rigid boundaries, or the term that I've heard thrown around is kind of bubble wrap parents, of kind of isolating or heavily restricting their kids. um, do you think that has kind of negative consequences? Like, I know we're trying to be proactive as parents. I'm not a parent, so I'm naive in this. Let me just say that first and foremost. But do you think that there needs to be a healthy balance in terms of what we let our kids experience versus what we try and protect them from? 'Cause, yeah, that's just something that comes to mind, because I know I like is Felicia. I know Felicia's kids, and I know she's a mom, very loving and caring person, and I'm just thinking of like what it would look like, to try and balance that. Like, hey, I want my kids to experience and to, sometimes make some of their own decisions, but at the same time, I want to protect them, especially in the technology world and age, and how it's just boomed in the last however long. And so I'm wondering, maybe for those of you who are parents here, of what that process is like, of not trying to bubble wrap and completely have these over rigid boundaries, but also balancing that sense of, as you said, role modeling and protection.
Man, if I could bubble wrap them, I would. But they won't stay still.
Yeah, right.
But like honestly, I think at the end of the day, I have to think through how am I protecting their well-being? Like what does overconsumption look like at their age, especially?
Mm.
And then, there's parental controls for things. As I know that we're talking about like things like internet usage and video game usage. You
Roblox,
know,
Minecraft,
I won't
all
even let
that.
my kids do Roblox.
Yeah,
I know, but because of
yeah,
again, from what I've been told about
yeah.
maybe there's not enough safeguards around Roblox. So my kids know, don't ask me about Roblox, right? And we have these conversations with them. Like we tell them
Mm,
why it's not so safe.
that's
So
good.
because we don't think that it's safe enough, we won't let you play with Roblox. See, watch Roblox, play with
Yeah.
Roblox. But then there are other things like maybe like Minecraft and stuff like that, and then we have those safeguards around those things. How long? are they allowed to play with these things? How, if there's internet, do I have these parental controls? Like, we cut off their time from like a certain amount of time that they could only consume, maybe 2 hours max or whatever it may be for each family or household. So we try our best to do it with them so that it doesn't feel like
Mm,
just like a top down, it's
Mhm.
my way or the highway, because then they'd be like, oh, you just don't like me having fun. It's like, so we
Mhm.
want them to have a good understanding of why we have these things in place, so that at least, yeah, they
Mhm.
can understand. And when they become parents one day, then they'll understand. That's my
yeah,
hope, anyway.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
No, that
yeah.
makes sense.
I think you've hit on something really important, and that is, if the goal, since these kids are growing up, we can't really put the genie back in the bottle, right? Technology is here to stay, and all of these devices and tools and whatnot. But I think something that might be helpful might be to remember that it's a tool. It's supposed to be a tool, not and used for us to enhance our lives, to enhance our relationships, to enhance, our connection with people. We're social beings. We're relational beings, and anything that is going to impact our development as, as human beings, is problematic. So how are we using the internet, the devices, media, etc., to to enhance our relationships and to
Mm,
make us healthier human beings? I think
yeah,
that might be
yeah,
kind of putting first things first, you know?
Mhm.
it's good.
I love
I
that
like the
you talked.
sense.
Oh,
Oh,
sorry. Oh no, I was just gonna say I love that you talked about the social aspect, because I know right now a lot of youth and kids are using it for socializing. And so even that, I think, is worth talking about, because it's like, but I won't have any friends if I don't play,
mm,
right? And so it's about having those discussions as well and navigating that piece,
Yeah, yeah.
because it's not like how it was back in the day. We would just go outside and we would throw some rocks and some stones and we'd be happy playing, frolicking in the sun, right?
mm.
It's a lot different now. It's looking a lot different. And
Very much so. And
yeah.
Felicia, I was gonna kind of comment on your thing as
Yeah.
Dr. Adrian is even talked about, but I really like your thing of collaboration as opposed to like maliciously restrictive. Like, because in the social aspect, I think of I have like 6 or 7 nieces and nephews, right? And I think of things like, Snapchat, TikTok, Instagram. There was that one where you had to post something by a certain time. I forget what that one was called, or whatever. And you have all these things that people are enjoying together, and social aspects and fear of missing out. That's all there, right? And so, for a child that feels like you're being maliciously restrictive, that can be, now there's tension between you two, or that's where maybe some of the secrecy starts or the sneaking starts. I think of when things might have been restrictive for me. I snuck around, but I really like this sense of, instead of it just being like, nope, my way or the highway, this is completely restricted because I said so. I hated that phrase. Oh my gosh,
Mhm.
because I said so. But the collaboration, right? Giving them a chance to talk, and that kind of stuff. You know what I actually really liked, and this could be
Mhm.
off topic too, and I know we're getting close to the end, but I really like the parents that talked about, they gave their children a chance to do like a slideshow or a presentation of like, here's why I should be allowed to XYZ, right? And as they're able to speak that, it gives them a chance to articulate and get them into
Mhm.
their kind of sense of wise mind, right? And use their rationalizing of like, here's why I should be able to do this. Here's the protection that I'm going to have. And I really appreciated seeing those videos of like, parents who allowed their
Mhm.
children to do that. And sometimes it was a no. Parents had a better rebuttal, or sometimes it's, hey, you made a good case for this. Let's try it out. But I like that collaboration. I like
Mhm.
that sense. It gives the child a sense of like understanding your point of view. Okay, this is not safe. Okay, well,
Mhm.
mom, like what can we do? Like, how do we make this safe? Or, and I like that because, yeah, it just seems like, um, again, a chance for the children to learn your point of view, a different
Mhm.
perspective, instead of you just being like, nope. Uh,
Mhm.
Maybe this is my own childhood trauma and bias coming out.
Yeah.
One of the things that was coming to mind too is parents, please be on the same page. Don't
Mm,
Mm,
please, let's be on the same page. Have your discussions about what is, negotiable, what's non, because kids are smart. They will go to the parent who they know is the jellyfish, okay? They'll be like, "Oh, can I have this please?" Like, be on the same page, because especially when you're setting, particular rules and boundaries and things like that. Like, if you guys are not on the same page, the kids will know, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
if it is 2 hours on the device, it's 2 hours on the device, right? It's
Mhm.
no, you know what I mean? And if you guys are softening that boundary together, like, okay, it's the weekend, so you could do it, be on the same page. Okay, I think that that's important, because especially when you're setting particular safeguards, if everybody's not on the same page, it's going to cause issues, because maybe one person will bend into the boundaries. And as we talked about earlier, right, when it comes to boundaries, if you don't stick to them, then it basically communicates something that, oh, I don't need to follow this particular boundary. So that's my little 2 cents. Be on the
Yeah.
same page.
I would just like to also add, along with, whatever enhances our relationships and our social, the social aspect of our lives. Another principle that can play into these guidelines and boundaries and so on could be a balance. So we
Yes.
want to have balance for our children, and so you want to think in terms of other activities as well besides just socializing. So music and sports and art and all of those things. This is these are the young ages where it benefits.
yeah, I like that
Absolutely.
sense of balance. Andrew, I'm
yes.
curious for you. Have you like I don't know if you have kids or you worked with kids in kind of your counseling and where you work.
I'm actually just soaking this conversation in because I have one on the way. So yeah, so I'm
Hey,
taking some notes.
nice.
I'm over here taking some notes.
Yay! Wow, that's
Congrats,
great
bro.
news.
Yeah, yeah. Thank
Congratulations.
you, thank you. So I'm just over here taking some notes on this and trying to, facilitate. But that's something that I've thought about and discussed, of just like, what is enough and how do you navigate that. And I really like what you said, Felicia, was like being on the same page. It's just like
Mhm.
whatever it is, just making sure that you and your partner are like on the same page with it, and it's like consistent communication throughout, I think, is really good. Yeah.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. If you guys can drop one last gem for the Love Bay family tonight, what would that be?
I probably won't drop anything new, but I was thinking about I knew this question was coming. So I was thinking it in my head, and I like the themes that have come out here. Things like navigating, clarifying, empowering, protecting, and recognizing that this is a multifaceted family system, that addiction rarely impacts just one person.
Right.
And so coming alongside both person who's in dealing with addiction and the family who's impacted, that we're all looking to, again, in a sense, empower, but also protect through things like boundaries, through clarification and bringing sense of awareness and helping all people navigate, right? The podcast I was listening to was that it impacts each person differently, right? Think of a sibling that's very, very, very close in age and like best friends with maybe the person who is struggling with addiction, and then let's say it's a son, and it's that this is like mom a mama's boy, right? And how this impacts mom, and then the dad had plans for like this strong kid and to take over the business, and then you know what I mean, like it impacts each person differently. And so coming alongside the whole family system, right, the individual and the system, okay, how do we navigate, how do we bring clarity, how do we bring protection, how do we bring motivation and empowerment? So those themes that came through this Maybe a lot of the people watching right now, maybe you'll have to go back and watch it, and now these themes will come clear to you and be like, oh yeah, this is. But those are the things I would tell people to kind of go back and watch through and pull out these themes of navigating, clarifying, powering, motivating, protecting.
Yeah. And I would say the same way that we talk to clients or someone who is using substances, that it's not going to be there's not going to be any healing in isolation, is the same thing I would say to the family members. Is it's hard to be in isolation dealing with this problem alone, or dealing with it just as a family. It's good to reach out to supports, whether that professional, whether it's friends around you. Reaching out to someone that you can talk to just kind of help you with that burden, because it becomes really difficult to carry it alone. But there is hope. You are not alone. There's other people dealing with this, and it doesn't mean that you're a failure or that you're a bad loved one if you decided to create a boundary, if you decide to say no. I think that there's hope in the fact that your loved one can find help and can be motivated to do that. So I know sometimes people can get really down on themselves, and really blame themselves, and that just puts you in a perpetual negative thinking cycle, and that's not going to be beneficial either. But just
Mhm.
reaching out, and hopefully that you can talk to someone and they be able to kind of help you with your thoughts in dealing with your loved one. But there is hope for your loved one, and also that you cannot change anything yourself. The most you can do is walk alongside them, and then you hope that they'll be able to figure things out as well.
Yeah, it's good.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
I would just underline hope and keep it very brief and say, it's if someone has been struggling with this for a very long time as a family, it can be very, it can feel very help. You can feel very helpless and hopeless, but have hope. Reach out. There are programs. There are people that have trained and can help you through this.
Hmm.
That's
Mm,
Hmm.
It's good.
my gem.
absolutely. Well said, guys. So, as we come to the end of tonight's conversation, I'm reminded that addiction is rarely an individual story. It's a family story, a relationship story, a community story. Over the past two Wildcard Tuesdays, we've challenged ourselves to look beyond what we see on the surface. We began by asking what's happening beneath the behavior, and tonight we turned our attention to the people whose lives are often changed alongside it, the partners, parents, children, siblings, friends, and loved ones who carry their own invisible burdens. If there's one message I hope you take away from this two-part series, is this: addiction deserves compassion, recovery deserves support, and families deserve healing too. Healing doesn't always mean that every relationship is restored exactly as it once was. Sometimes healing means rebuilding trust. Sometimes it means learning healthy boundaries. And sometimes it means finding the courage to ask for help. And sometimes healing begins simply by knowing that you're not alone. I want to extend my heartfelt thanks to our incredible panelists, Dr. Adrian Sequeira, Josh Dale, and Angie Roach, for once again sharing your expertise, your compassion, and your commitment to reducing the stigma surrounding addiction. Your insights have reminded us that recovery is possible, that hope is real, and that meaningful change happens when we lead with empathy instead of judgment. And to everyone who has joined us over the past two episodes, thank you for being willing to lean into the conversations that aren't always easy, but are so incredibly important. Whether you've been personally impacted by addiction, lost someone who has, or simply wanted to better understand the experience of others, we hope these conversations have offered insight, encouragement, and hope. Next week, we return with another powerful edition of She Speaks. I'll be joined by clinical psychologist Fiona Andrews for a conversation titled, Does Representation in Therapy Really Matter? Let's talk about it. Together, we'll explore how culture, identity, and lived experience shape the therapeutic relationship, and why feeling seen, understood, and represented can profoundly impact the healing process. We'll discuss what culturally responsive care truly looks like, why representation matters beyond diversity alone, and how trust, safety, and connection influence our mental health journey. Whether you're considering therapy, supporting someone else, or you're a mental health professional yourself, this is a conversation you don't want to miss. Until next time, thank you for spending your Tuesday evening with us on the Mental Health Hour on Love Bay, Afrobeat Music, and Talk Radio. I'm your host, Felicia Fishoff, registered psychotherapist and founder of Rooted in Resilience Psychotherapy and Wellness. Take care of yourselves, take care of one another, and remember, healing rarely happens in isolation. It happens in relationships, in community, and in the courage to keep showing up for ourselves and for each other. Good night, everyone. Peace out.
See you, everyone.